Hello everybody, it's Pedro, and in today's video I'd like to talk about perhaps the biggest opportunity that you have in terms of like career growth if you are in compositing as a discipline. Of course, it's not like liquid, meaning like the net result of what I'm about to say is only directly related whether or not you are in comp, but without a doubt that if your discipline is compositing, you have better chances of attaining the highest role that we know of regarding the market that we are in, which is VFX supervision, right? And I know that a lot of you would like to be there. And I'm gonna demonstrate here why that's the reality. Because what happens is, to start with the model, is first of all acknowledging that what we do, like the market, the visual effects as an art form, right, works as sort of like an assembly line, all right, that starts with certain disciplines, and then that thing gets passed over to the next discipline in line until it reaches comp eventually, right? So what happens is, if we have like this as like sort of like the assembly, I'm going to rewrite this again. If we have this sort of like as our assembly line, okay, and this is sort of like the levels, okay, which is VFX soup, and then leadership in general of these different disciplines, and then this is like senior, and then mid, and then junior, okay? All of these are valid, by the way, okay? So what I mean by this is that there are disciplines within the development of a shot, all right? There's different disciplines involved, right? So let's say, for example, and I'm sure that I'm going to forget one or two disciplines because I'm doing this on the fly, but let's say that I'm talking about like modeling and texturing to start with, and then we have, for example, tracking, which is sort of like a side discipline because it's not necessarily speaking dependent as others are. Then we have rigging, for example. Then we have animation. Then we have effects. Then we have lighting. Then we have comp. There are other ones that I'm not putting here because it's just like the model, right? And so what happens is, the more we are at the end of the assembly line, the more knowledge a certain discipline have about the others because they have to deal with them, right? For example, lighting will definitely have some knowledge about effects. Effects will have some knowledge, in this case, it's interchangeable. But what I'm saying is, the more you go to the end, the more you'll have to deal with certain aspects of the different disciplines. So comp, take into account that it's the less in line, will have to deal with a lot of other things in here in many different ways, right? It has to deal with lighting because probably lighting is actually the main component in terms of like the deliverables that we're going to receive in compositing comes from lighting, but sometimes it comes directly from effects. And sometimes it's gonna come, definitely it's gonna come certain things from tracking because of the cameras and stuff like that. Not so much directly with modeling, but sometimes you need to check some things regarding modeling or texturing, or grayscale renders from one of these disciplines, whatever it may be, right? And so what I'm saying is, the more you are at the end of the assembly line, the more knowledge you have about the other disciplines. Not from a practitioner point of view necessarily speaking, because again, we work with in specialities, all right? So you should be very focused about your discipline, but without a doubt that the more you are at the end of the assembly line, the more chances you have to deal with certain aspects of other disciplines. And so what happens is, because of this reason, your probability of reaching this level here, it's higher, because this role in here will have to deal also in dailies with a lot of these other things. So it's not expected that this role will have to know in depth about like all of these other things, but definitely if this role comes from this role, all right, as a background, there's way more chances that this person will have, or this role will have certain types of knowledge because of the background about other disciplines. But the same doesn't happen with, for example, the more in the beginning you are at the journey, that it doesn't have the same, you don't have the same knowledge, because the work stops in here, right? The work stops here. This work doesn't carry over the same way that this work doesn't carry over, necessarily speaking. Same goes, all right? It's like one step at a time. This is a sort of like more simplistic way to say it, but I guess you get the point. So what I'm saying is, all of these disciplines in here, these levels here, in regarding all these disciplines, of course, people grow more or less depending on their experience, depending on the type of companies that they work with, depending on the type of project that they are used to work, etc. So these levels, you start here and then you go bit by bit. But if your goal is to reach this level, the chances of getting there are directly related, sort of like as an exponential curve. You have more chances to get there the more you are at the end of the assembly line, because of the reasons that I just mentioned before. Because this role needs to look at everything, right? When you're in Delis, you need to look at lighting, you need to look at FX, you need to look at animation, you need to look at reading, you need to look at the tracking, all that kind of stuff. So that knowledge, take into account this background, okay? You have way more chances that if you are here, you have way more chances to get to this position rather than a position that perhaps is in here. Now, of course, there are exceptions to the rule, obviously. This is just like in terms of like the probability on getting there, right? And so it's also very important, alongside of realizing this, it's also very, very important that to get to a leadership role, so past this line in here, it's not about only the hard skills. That's very important to transition within this level here. Okay, you ascend from junior to senior, right? After this, it's a different game. So you definitely need to be very specific about your craft. You need to be very knowledgeable, technically speaking, artistically speaking, all that kind of stuff, in all of these areas, by the way, of course. But then past this moment, it's about different game. It's about different types of skills that we talked about before, like, for example, leadership skills in general, which has to do with management, which has to do with soft skills, which has to do with strategy, all these kind of things, right? And other things that are derivative of some of these things in here. For example, management means many different things. Means project management, yes, but means management in terms of like how you start a shot. Like, for example, when you are on a leadership role, it's not about your shot anymore. It's about like perhaps a whole sequence or perhaps the whole show, of a given discipline. So the hard skills will always need to be there because they are super important, because you need to support your teams, of course, but you cannot compensate for the lack of these type of skills, because these are more required to do a better job at these roles rather than at these roles, right? Why? Because you're not the one, necessarily speaking, doing the shots anymore. You are the one supporting the shots and have like a lot of other responsibilities, looking at everything like from a way higher point of view, making sure that things are deliverable on time, making sure at the same time, yes, that you have the skills to untangle your team or certain members of your team of like a technical challenge or whatever, of course. But it's more about this at this time, or it should be more about this, rather than the nitty gritty kind of things about a specific shot or a group of shots. All right. And that's why, because this lacks so much, that's why the majority of the people, even the ones that transition from this point onwards, that's why they struggle. Here, they struggle. And I've seen this multiple times, because these are the people that we work with. Some of them do a certain, a good job at certain parts, but there are a lot of these things that they lack. And although everything seems to be checking out like on the surface level, because they have the title, they have the money, they have all that kind of stuff, but they're working their asses off. They're not being the leaders that they would like to be, or the leaders that they thought they would be once before they got there, right? And because there's like a bunch of other things that now are required and they lack, that's why they struggle, But the chances, this curve is still relevant, because you have better chances, take into account all the knowledge that you have from all these steps before. The chances increase to get to this level, increase the more you are at the end of the assembly line, because of all the knowledge that you have, not in depth, but to a certain extent, the knowledge that you have about like other disciplines. So this is definitely one of the biggest opportunities, that if you are closer, the more you are closer to the end of the assembly line, the more the more opportunities, perhaps if you develop, other skills like these skills and others alongside with your technical skills, the more chances you have to be at this position or this position, any of these positions, in the best way possible. Of course, leadership positions happen in other disciplines, of course. And I'm talking about like this position here that most people want to get there. Not everybody, and that's totally fine, no problem at all. But that's basically how it goes. So I just wanted to record this video to tell you and to inspire you that if you are from one of, especially this discipline is related to this channel, of course, you have way better chances to get to that position, rather than, you have more percentage of success. That's what I mean, because you are at the end of the assembly line. Again, I want to stress this. I can't stress this enough. I've met many different VFX supervisors that come from other disciplines, but the majority have this as their background, and that's because of this reason. And related to this is also the fact that sometimes, and I've talked about this before, so I'm gonna perhaps repeat a little bit myself in regards to what I said in other videos. But what I'm saying by this is, because this is a reality of the situation, that's also very important to be congruent with the role that you want to sell yourself as. And sometimes what happens is, I've seen, and probably you've seen, and maybe you are one of these people, that your LinkedIn profile, for example, says something like, let's assume that it's within comp, okay? So let's say comp supervisor, comp sup, and then slash comp lead slash senior comp, okay? So all of these things, I've seen profiles with all of this, and sometimes even more, or sometimes, something that is from one discipline and then says lighting or whatever, right? If you are one of these people, and if your thinking process is, the more I have here, the more flexible I am with my skill set, that's not how it works. I've hired hundreds of people, as I said before. This is not how it works. All of this means many different things in many different aspects. A comp supervisor has a role that is different from a comp lead. The type of knowledge is also different. Should be different, because it's a different role, right? So it needs to be different, necessarily speaking. And also, the salary is also different. Okay? So if you are all of this, how can the person that is interviewing you should face you? Potentially is going to, even if you want to really be in this position and you have all of this, potentially what that person will choose is this at best, because it's the cheapest one. Is perhaps the one that has more places available, because that's just the way it works, right? Because of course it's a pyramid. The more you go up in the hierarchy of things, the less places are available. That's just the way it works, right? And perhaps that's not how you want to be seen as. And another problem with this is there will come a point in which you really want to be in this position. You really want to be considered as this person, right? But if you have all of this, and if your career trajectory is always one like this, okay, or something even a little bit different, which is, let's say this is the comp sub position, and then this is the comp lead, and then this is the comp, the senior comp, let's assume, okay. If your career trajectory is in one month you are here, a couple of months after that you are here, then you drop again to senior, and then there will come a point, for whatever reason, like for a couple of months you are here, and then that position lasts for, let's say, 6 months, and then you drop again here, then you jump ahead. You know what I mean? This means, from who's hiring, means danger potentially, because you are not, all of these things are different. And perhaps because you didn't develop this skill well enough, you cannot sustain there. you know, because this is about different game. All of these things mean different things, mean all of these things are different. So you end up having a salary that is not sustainable and not related, or not the one that you want, because your profile looks like this in terms of like positions, right? What you want instead is to have a trajectory that it's as close as possible to this, from the beginning of your career until a certain point in your career. This is what who's hiring you want to see, as much as possible, of course. And this is what you want for yourself as well, because this means all of these things as an evolution. And this, for perhaps, it's the most one of the most important things for you, which is the salary. Okay, for many different reasons, of course. I don't need to expand on this, right? So if you are not conscious about this curve and then this type of curves, you know, it's a missed opportunity, I would say. Okay, so I just wanted to give you this extra curve for you to understand what I just meant. This is the type of stuff that I wanted to talk to you today, just to give you a little bit more of inspiration. If you are from this discipline, double down on the hard skills, yes. But if you've been doing this for 5, 10, 15 years, it's perhaps like time for you to develop other skills, because these skills will make your life way easier once you get here. And you have way better chances to be the leader that you once thought that you would be before getting there. And your life is going to be way better because you're going to develop skills, if you choose to develop them. You can develop skills that are transferable, okay, without forgetting the hard skills about the certain disciplines, but they are transferable to now be applicable to bigger game stuff, you know, whether it's this or any other kind of management kind of role, okay, that we can even go outside the artistic side, if you will, if that's what you want to do. But this is a model that I think it's easy to understand, and this is the type of stuff that I would like to talk to you today. And so I hope you liked it. All right, see you next time, and enjoy. Bye bye.